Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, on behalf of Great Afghanistan Movement, let me thank all my viewers around the world for watching my videos regularly. My today's topic is Pakistan, a garrison state. Pakistan has not come into being by a political struggle, but Pakistan is the product of the conspiracy of dying British Empire. After the Second World War, the British Empire had become so weak that it couldn't continue to keep India as the British colony anymore. So they decided to quit India, but to divide it. Because the British wanted to have a puppet state in South Asia for its goals about former Soviet Union and for oil benefits in Middle East. So Pakistan was established not as a country, but as a project. But now there is no more Soviet Union and there is no threat to the oil of the British and its allies. It means that the project of Pakistan is over. Before partition, the region from Kabul to Delhi and Rangoon was considered the most integrated region of the world. But after partition, this is now less integrated region. Since its birth in 1947, Pakistan is not only cancer for its own people and neighbors, but also for the world community. After Second World War, there is no more British Empire, and now it is Pakistan's turn to be a part of history. Pakistan is an unnatural state with unnatural boundaries. Pakistan came into being on the land of India, Afghanistan, Sindh, and Bengal. During the partition, 33% of British Indian Army were Muslims, where more than 80% were from Punjab province. At that time, the population of Punjab was 25% of the population of Pakistan, but in army, civil military establishment, and judiciary, they were more than 80%. All the other provinces, Northwest Frontier Province, now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh Province, and East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, were handed over under the hegemony of Punjab Province by the Punjab-dominated Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, judiciary, and Punjab elites mafia. So it was obvious that Pakistan could never be a viable state because these states and nationalities will always be in conflict with them for their territories. In March 1948, Pakistan invaded an independent country, Balochistan, and annexed it to Pakistan by force. Punjab hijacked the other small nationalities in Pakistan. The Pashtuns, Baloch, and Sindhis are living on their own land like the slaves of Punjab. Bengali got rid of Pakistan in 1971, while further disintegration of Pakistan is around the corner. Except Punjab, freedom movements have always been in bloom in the other provinces who, like Bengalis, also want to get rid of Pakistan. Punjab has made India security risk for Pakistan. However, the Pashtuns, Baloch, Sindhis, and Bengalis had nothing to do with it. They had no grudges with India. After the partition, 3% of refugees who betrayed their motherland India and migrated to Pakistan. They also brought with themselves Urdu language and Urdu culture. The 3% refugees imposed their language and culture on the 97% indigenous people of Pakistan. Pakistan has destroyed the thousands of year-old language, culture, and history of the Pashtuns, Baloch, and Sindhis. Therefore, linguistically, historically, and culturally, Pakistan has become an orphan state. Therefore, within 25 years, more than half of Pakistan became Bangladesh. In the real sense, Pakistan is Punjab and Punjab is Pakistan. And the other nationalities don't want to live in Pakistan as of the third category citizens. The real owners of Pakistan are the Punjab-dominated Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, judiciary, and Punjab elite mafia. Other countries have the army, but in case of Pakistan, army has the country. Pakistan is the product of war. If there would be no Second World War, there would be no Pakistan. But unfortunately, Pakistan continued the same inherited policy of the British Empire in the South Asia and especially in Afghanistan. On 12th August 1948, Pakistan Army opened fire on peaceful procession of the Pashtuns in Babada, Charsadda in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. and killed about 700 people, leaving a lot of people wounded. In March 1948, Pakistan Army invaded an independent country, Balochistan, and annexed it to Pakistan. On 26 July 1949, Pakistan bombed a village in Afghanistan, killing 23 Afghan women, kids, and elders. In 1971, 3 million Bengalis were slaughtered and 400,000 women were raped by Pakistan Army. Since 1971, Pakistan has always been obsessed about the further disintegration. So the Pashtuns, Baloch, and Sindhi freedom fighters are being treated with iron hands by Punjab-dominated Pakistan Army. 80,000 Pashtuns were killed in the Pashtuns tribal area. The bullet-riddled bodies of Baloch people are being sent to their houses. The atrocities of the Punjab Army in Sindh is everyday business. Pakistan has become a theater of internecine violence, its condition being so problematic for international security for so long. It has emerged as a failing state, a state that cannot provide minimum law and order, cannot control various competing societal forces, and cannot survive economically without external support. It remains a heavily militarized warrior state with an intense focus on narrowly defined national security concerns. Pakistan took no benefits of increased global trade and investment. Pakistan has devoted considerable energy into military security. Indeed, it is essentially a warrior state in many respects. Intense pursuit of military security has made Pakistan less secure and unified as a coherent political unit. In Pakistan, war making is not an engine for national development and consolidation. The excessive war making efforts can have perverse effects on Pakistan, where a lot of resources of the economy are used for military purposes rather than for the larger society. After World War II, rapid development has come to states that engaged in deep economic interactions with the world market. They transformed their societies and economies by instituting universal education, healthcare, quality infrastructure, and land reforms, in which Pakistan has terribly failed. States that pursued extreme ideological goals have not fared well. An ideology-based Soviet Union couldn't survive. Similarly, Pakistan disintegrated in 1971. As ally of great powers, Pakistan received a lot of economic assistance from abroad for their strategic position. But that assistance was used only for the benefits of a very small class of Pakistan, like Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, and Punjab elites mafia. They never had the developmental state approach and to undertake transformative policies internally. For over 7 decades, the Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, and Punjab elite mafia pursued several geographically oriented policies at the expense of political and economic reforms. Therefore, the result has been domestic stagnation and even chaos. Pakistan's domestic instability has worsened regional and global peace and security. Some of these policies looked successful for a short time, but in the long run, they have only distorted the country's development and imperiled its national security and unity. The United States and China have helped to make Pakistan's development sluggish and make the state less secure. They have discouraged the Pakistani elites from undertaking the painful economic and social reforms necessary for rapid and equitable economic and political development. In fact, the elites' policies have resulted in the creation of a violent, insecure, and ideology-driven polity which is neither strong, nor prosperous, nor stably democratic, nor unified. The security they seek has been as elusive as ever. Pakistan's elite has had both the motive and the opportunity to pursue such policies. However, ideas alone are insufficient to explain national behavior over a period of time. The combination of ideas and circumstances, motive and opportunity, tells us why a country would pursue a warrior state strategy. Since the very inception of the state in 1947, the Pakistani elite has held on to an ideologically oriented hyper-realpolitik worldview. Some members of the elite also developed an agenda due to a conception that is a state founded on the basis of Islam, Pakistan should be in the vanguard of promoting and defending Islamic values and interests on a global scale. Territorially, Pakistan is situated in the periphery of South Central Asia, a pivotal region where the interests of the great powers intersect. During the Cold War, Pakistan was thus a clear choice as an ally for the United States. Pakistan has taken advantage of the ongoing Sino-Indian rivalry since the early 1960s. These strategic relationships brought considerable economic and military resources to Pakistan, but these were insufficient to make it a prosperous state. Its strategic position has laid a strategic curse on Pakistan. Pakistan is well endowed in the geostrategic arena due to its location, with no priority of its internal economic development. The Pakistan Army and civil military establishment can use the rents received through strategic alignment to keep the state afloat. Over the years, Pakistan's pivotal role in great power strategic contest received vast amount of foreign aid, but this has not resulted in substantial economic development and security. The United States has provided Pakistan billions of dollars in military and economic aid. Pakistan has emerged as a war-making state. According to Charles Tilly, war made the state and the state made war. Pakistan imposed 4 wars on India, and for the last 40 years, Pakistan has imposed undeclared proxy war in Afghanistan to make Afghanistan so weak that it could not demand for its land occupied by Pakistan. In wars, some states were totally destroyed, while in others were catalyzed to revolution. Austria-Hungary and the Soviet Union were great powers before they collapsed. Several other states declined without disappearing, including Germany, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and Sweden. First World War brutally exposed the weaknesses of Tsarist Russia and left it open to revolution in 1917. War and war preparation could also bring about wholesale destruction and state collapse. War and war preparation have not produced positive results in Pakistan. In fact, war-making efforts have led many developing states to decay and failure. They could not prevent recurring internal conflicts, civil wars, and political violence. That's why Pakistan couldn't survive, and within 25 years of inception, more than half of Pakistan became Bangladesh. The Soviet Union drove its economy into the ground to keep up its military, which led it to disintegration. Not all warrior states turn war-making into development, and not all survive. In the same way, Pakistan has stagnated as a state. In a continuous obsession with external threat, Pakistan has neglected long-term economic development. Especially in the contemporary global economy, this has proven a fatal error. The measure of success or failure of the state is based on its ability to provide political goods such as internal security, the opportunity for citizens to resolve their disputes with the state and their fellow citizens without recourse to violence, enforceable rule of law, and popular participation in the political process. But for 35 years, Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, judiciary, and Punjab elites mafia have destroyed the political culture in Pakistan. They have not given the opportunity to any other institution to be flourished in Pakistan. A strong state is also able to offer public goods such as education, healthcare, and physical infrastructure. A state is considered weak or failing if it is not able to offer most of these public goods, where Pakistan is the best example. Weak states are also little or no effective control over some parts of their territory, where power lies with local groups that may not show allegiance to the state. Colonial powers drew lines on maps for their own convenience and not for the post-colonial governments whether they will control it or not. The best example is the Durrani line between Afghanistan and Pakistan. When confronting such regions, states face a difficult challenge. Their efforts to integrate their territories can result in repressive measures that alienate the population even further. War-making efforts can likewise weaken states because they bring along several social, economic, and political pathologies. Ladies and gentlemen, legitimacy has become more important to state building, and legitimacy can come from a combination of democracy and welfare. The state must now provide its citizens with clear benefits. For perpetual peace, democracy, economic interdependence, and international institutions are must. But in Pakistan, these phenomena are not available. If in Pakistan, some political leader wants to come to power, first he will have to do the deal with the Pakistan army, and then they can come into power. It means that the so-called political government is completely controlled by Pakistan army. But in Pakistan, if someone condemns the role of Pakistan army and civil military establishment, then in the name of Islam and Pakistan, these people are being either suppressed brutally or killed by the state machinery. When after 1947, there were first free and fair elections in Pakistan in 1971, it was also not recognized by Punjab. They were ready to break Pakistan, but were not ready to hand over power to Bengalis in East Pakistan, which led Pakistan to disintegration. Ladies and gentlemen, loyalty comes through the benefits that the citizenry receives from the state. But in Pakistan, the other nationalities except Punjabis get bullet-riddled corpses, F-16 bombardment, missing person, and baked bodies. Then why they should be loyal to Pakistan? In the post-World War II era, war making has become even more counterproductive for state capacity. But as Pakistan is the result of the World War II, so Pakistan adopted the same counterproductive war-making policy. Excessive focus on national security can destroy a state, as it happened in the case of the former Soviet Union. A warrior state like Pakistan seriously hampered state capacity as well as political and economic development. Foster economic development in the post-war era has required integration into the global economy and adoption of a developmental state strategy, but it does not exist in Pakistan. States like South Korea and Taiwan have focused on active military preparations to face existential threats. However, neither allowed security to get in the way of prosperity. They offered many public goods to the citizenry, such as education, healthcare, universal employment, and a high standard of living. But Pakistan is going in the opposite direction. Pakistan's involvement in the proxy wars in Afghanistan and Kashmir has avoided Pakistan as a terrorist state. Pakistan has always been engaged in by training and sending insurgents into Indian-controlled Kashmir and Afghanistan. Usually, countries invite the specialists from other countries to integrate in the world peaceful system and trade. But Pakistan invites terrorists, train them, and send them back to other countries for terrorist activities. Other countries export their goods to the world market, but Pakistan is exporting terrorism and proliferating nuclear technology. Economic growth can be endangered by a developing state's excessive preoccupation with military and security issues. Pakistan has not done substantial internal reforms that utilize its workforce to modern industrial purposes and make its domestic market, business, and welfare friendly. State building results the integrative power of the state to invest in its people, but Pakistan has failed to do it. During ordinary times, citizens want to know what the state can do for their economic and social welfare. But if the army, civil military establishment, and elites continuously falter in this mission, they may simply fail to achieve the national cohesion, which is essential for building a strong state. Due to the failure of it, Pakistan has been looking for national cohesion till now. State capacity in today's world can be judged on the basis of the ability of a state to develop and implement policies in order to provide collective goods such as security, order, and welfare to its citizens in a legitimate and effective manner, untrammeled by internal or external actors. Since 1947, Pakistan has been extraordinarily obsessed with security and particularly the military balance with India. Therefore, Pakistan offers a home base for transnational terrorist network to initiate wars and crises to extract territorial concessions. Extremist Islamic groups have become key players in the political system of Pakistan. However, war making have come with strong negatives. It has generated continuous military rule, stunting the growth of a healthy civil society. More specifically, it has destroyed the chances of democracy and civil institutions taking roots. It hampers rapid economic growth and creates a garrison state that is bureaucratic and excessively focused on military control over all domains of society. The enormous focus on external threats has not helped to develop a cohesive nation state or national unity, but bridging ethnic and political divisions for the sake of defense against India. Pakistan experiences several ongoing sub-national autonomy movements because they are deprived of political, economic autonomy and democratic rights. Pakistan Army always seeks military solution to a political problem. The blowback effects from these efforts have only increased ethnic and communal problems within Pakistan. What is most puzzling is the insufficiency of Islam as a factor in gluing together the Pakistani society. Neither the national security state approach nor the use of the religion has specified the class and ethnic divisions of Pakistan. Economic benefits have been unevenly divided, making some ethnic groups less successful than others. Most of the ruling class, including the military elites, has always come from the province of Punjab. Before East Pakistan's secession in 1971, the ruling class showed little interest in improving the condition of Bengalis, but Pakistan has not learned lessons from it. The fiercely independent Pashtun tribes in the northwest were never pacified, and the state has not offered a compelling economic or political model to them. More generally, successive rulers of Pakistan followed policies that negatively impacted political and economic development, integration, and long-term security. As a result, Pakistan has fallen behind in the arena of economic development. A deeper understanding of Pakistan development has immense policy significance in the age of terrorism and nuclear proliferation. In both cases, Pakistan has emerged as the single most important source of challenge. Since the 1990s, Pakistan has become the world's biggest hotbed of transnational terrorism with the collusion of elements of the state. Since 2001, Pakistan has also become the home of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations waging war in Afghanistan. It has also posed a major challenge in nuclear proliferation with the Abdul Qadir Khan network illegally transferring nuclear materials to countries such as North Korea, Iran, and Libya. In the midnight hour of October 4, 2003, it was detected that Pakistan was sending 5 containers full of centrifuges to enrich uranium to Libya. Despite this enormous discovery, the United States did not do much to get to the bottom of the scandal. The George W. Bush administration has been accused of hampering investigations by the Suez Authority by refusing to provide information to arrest key members of the Qadir Khan deadliest ring. Pakistan refused to allow Qadir Khan to be interviewed by US law enforcement officers or International Atomic Energy Agency officials. Despite being the biggest source of nuclear proliferation in the contemporary era, why then Pakistan being let off unpunished? Why does it remain one of the largest recipients of American aid? The answer lies in Pakistan's strategic salience and its elite's willingness and ability to carry out US policy objectives in the region. Pakistan receives rents for its geopolitical services to the great powers, which has discouraged its leaders from undertaking a more sustainable developmental path. The phenomenon of geostrategic curse is one of the major reasons for Pakistan remaining a typical warrior state, which is unable to transform itself into a proper democracy and a developmental state. Pakistan has simultaneously been blessed and cursed with strategic importance for the great powers due to its location and willingness of the army to play geopolitical games. But this geostrategic centrality may have benefited only the military and not ordinary people of Pakistan. During the Cold War era, Pakistan became a key US ally and beginning in mid-1950s provided base facilities for spying operations against the former Soviet Union. In the 1980s, it served as a conduit for the supply of weapons and funds to the Afghan resistance against Soviet occupation. Participation in the geopolitical competition between the US and former USSR brought billions of dollars and modern weapons to Pakistan. The military and political elites have not used it to innovate in either the economy or the political sphere. Foreign support was largely sufficient to pay the cost of waging war externally and support the warrior state internally. In essence, Pakistan became a rentier state, living off the rents provided by its external benefactors for supporting their particular geostrategic goals. As the military elite came to dominate the economic and political systems, they had the most to lose if any major economic reforms efforts were undertaken. Thus, the military bureaucratic elites have little incentive to develop a bilateral economic or political order, because then it would only undercut their paramount position in Pakistani society. Pakistan Army destroyed democratic institutions. There is no economic development, because the Pakistan Army and civil military establishment know that foreign powers and agency will bail them out. This strategic curse explains why an obsessive focus with military security has failed to make Pakistan more secure or economically prosperous. Pakistan is one of the world's least effective tax collecting states. Many of the rich, including the political elites, pay no taxes. The absence of a proper tax regime makes the governments less accountable to the population. Moreover, it reduces the legitimacy of the government, as it does not need to develop larger roots in the society. Between 1960 and 2012, Pakistan received $73.1 billion from bilateral and multilateral sources. 3/4 of that amount was for military purposes. Only 1/4 was for development, which means that foreign aid has failed to improve the economic condition in Pakistan. Pakistan's alliance relationship with the United States has been pivotal in gaining aid from other nations and international institutions. The aid has provided legitimacy to the military regimes in particular. Only the Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, political and economic elite mafia of Pakistan have benefited from this aid. Since September 11, 2001, Pakistani military has not used most of the funds for fighting terror as promised. Rather, it has engaged in corrupt practices, rendering counterterrorism efforts a failure. A key effect of the geostrategic curse is the tendency to continue on the same path of easy money. The Pakistan Army and civil military establishment have played double games as a way to extract financial resources from its key allies, especially from the United States of America. This is because of a conviction that if the security problem is fully solved, then the external ally will shun Pakistan. The military's desire to maintain a semi-feudal system that benefited its own class interests resulted in negligible socio-economic progress. As the prime beneficiary of the rentier state attributes of the Pakistani economy, the military has displayed little interest in improving the extractive and integrative powers of the state, which let alone transforming Pakistani society. Foreign economic and military aid, as well as remittance from expatriate Pakistanis, have discouraged the military and civilian elites from undertaking the key economic and social reforms necessary for export-driven growth. Pakistan never equated economic sovereignty with national sovereignty. From the beginning, the Pakistani elite failed to offer effective leadership to change the system because they regarded foreign alliances and aid as sufficient for maintaining their geopolitical status. The frequent military coups and subsequent military rule did not help to get out of the strategic curse. The presumed external security threats have been the basis for both Pakistan's frequent episode of military rule and its inability to develop a viable democratic order. Even when civilian governments were in charge, the military never gave up control, resulting in a hybrid governance structure. As a result of this preoccupation with security, the military became the strongest political and economic actor in Pakistan. Active involvement in proxy wars and insurgencies, such as in Afghanistan and Kashmir, created a massive infrastructure for terrorism and violence. As a result, parallel forms of authority emerged over time. The state has not been able to assert its power over civilian society. The military has also emerged as a key economic force in Pakistan society. Senior military officers are given land grants by the state, and over the years they have emerged as a major land owning class. They have presence in all other key businesses as well. Since the 1980s, the military has also made pacts with the radical Islamic and ethnic-based groups with no interest in modernizing society. Pakistan has been using these groups for their terrorist activities in Afghanistan and Kashmir. These extremist groups do seek social transformation, but not on a developmental path. Instead, they hope to transform Pakistan into a bastion of fundamentalist Islam. The pursued existential rivalry with a larger India and the desire to achieve strategic parity with this neighbor are the main source of the Pakistan Army and civil military establishment mindset. According to this logic, the chief national security problem is the military threat from India. This threat requires the army to hold the dominant position in domestic society, both in terms of political clout and resource allocation. Pakistan is a state built for the protection of Muslim interests, largely Sunni and not other religious groups. This means minorities within the country are expected to accept a subsidiary role. According to mindset of Pakistan Army, civil military establishment and mafia elites, Pakistan was built on Islamic principle, so it should also strive for the protection of Islamic ideas and fellow Muslim countries on a global scale. According to Pakistani mindset, Afghanistan should under all circumstances be brought within the Pakistani orbit to avoid the risk that India make it its ally and thereby upset Pakistan's security on both borders. Finally, peace with India and Afghanistan is desirable, but only if they concede territory and largely on Pakistani terms. State civil military elites encourage army to pursue a military-first approach to problem. The warrior state flows directly from this logic. Pakistan's alignment with China may be provoking India to respond negatively toward Pakistan. Pakistan army must be prepared for the next war, which can happen without warning. A warrior state creates several social, political, and psychological pathologies. Pakistan army, civil military establishment, and elites tend to exploit windows of opportunity whenever presented. They also do not often learn from past mistakes. In time, Pakistan Army becomes the core national actor in both the political and economic realms. Ladies and gentlemen, unless there are countervailing power centers that can take on the military by emphasizing the need to abandon a hyper-realpolitik approach, the military will never change its policies. The absence of strong demand for institutional reforms thus acts as a major impediment to change in Pakistan. These demands usually come from powerful social and political groups, and they can succeed during brief windows of opportunities such as national crisis. Activism by an internationally oriented civil society comprising progressive political parties with the support of powerful elements of the middle and business classes is essential for change. Indeed, civil society needs to have the ideas, power, and inclination to demand new democratic institutions and continuously defend such institutions from attacks by the military. From time to time, a form of social revolution has to take place for a society to transform. These revolutions are revolt from below that can produce rapid social transformation. If a state has a semi-feudal system and the military emerges as a powerful economic actor, it will have little interest in modernizing or pursuing economic and political reforms. Such states are not good as extracting internal resources either, especially if external aid is sufficient to pay for militarization and security competition. A weak civil society can simply perpetuate this system. Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, and Punjab elite mafia have failed to extract or innovate because outside aid largely compensated for economic shortfalls. A weak state has been the result of these processes. The demand for institutional reform in Pakistan has not been strong enough to force the military to abandon either its commitment to national dominance or its security-first approach. Political parties, whenever they have assumed power, have been almost invariably corrupt. The military has remained the powerhouse of the country even when civilians hold office. The middle and working class are too weak to wage a social revolution that would overthrow the warrior state and generate a true democratic order. They are also vulnerable to nationalist or religious myths and exaggeration propagated by the military and the national security managers. Pressures for revolutionary changes can also come from outside. In this case, the main source of such a demand should have been the United States, the core supporter of Pakistan. Secondary supporters such as China and Saudi Arabia are unlikely to pressure for institutional reforms because these are themselves not democratic countries. United States policy has been one of the last opportunities and misguided priorities. Washington has generally found the Pakistani military a useful ally in geopolitical conflicts or in the pursuit of short-term regional policies. Powerful stakeholders in both countries developed links that allowed the perpetuation of the status quo and not to create a proper democracy in Pakistan. Pakistani army was the more reliable partner in the United States' various geopolitical conflicts over the years. The complexity in this relationship are many, but the Pakistan army always had the shrewdness to function as a loyal ally of the United States of America, despite occasional ruptures in the relationship. Powerful sympathizers in Washington never saw a democratic Pakistan as feasible or desirable due to the overwhelming need for Pakistan to be on the American side, whether against the former Soviet Union or the Al-Qaeda. Much of this is the result of US policymakers' preference for quick and dirty solution instead of more far-reaching policy based on a deeper analysis of Pakistan's problem. The United States has almost exclusively employed one ready-made instrument, military and economic aid, and that's it. However, this is in sharp contrast with US policy in Korea and Taiwan in the 1960s and 1970s, where US agencies such as USAID demanded structural change and economic integration with the world market. American and Western controlled global financial institutions such as International Monetary Funds (IMF) and World Bank occasionally made demands on Pakistan and set conditions for loan disbursement. But those demands were not strong enough as they had to bow to the pressures of their lead donor members. Similarly, China and Saudi Arabia have also helped to perpetuate the system by supporting Pakistan for balance of power or religious regions. While South Korea also faced an existential security threat and had a deep alliance with Washington, but its elites managed to transform the national economy. Indeed, this transformation was partly driven by the security imperative, which is the opposite of Pakistan's experience. In the post-war period, economic and political development has been rapid, and states have been able to grow out of their centuries-old poverty and political underdevelopment in a shorter time span. Ladies and gentlemen, only independence is not enough to be a strong country. In Latin America, states have been independent over 150 years, yet most remain weak. This tells us that time is not a sufficient factor in making a state stronger. Other factors may be at work too. A developing country, even when it faces extreme national security challenges, can become cohesive and strong through a developmental path. The Pakistan Army, civil military establishment, and Punjab elite mafia proved to be shrewd in one thing: milking the geostrategic rent, but not developing or extract sufficient resources from its society. The major allies would not allow Pakistan to go bankrupt. During the past 2 decades, Pakistan came very close to bankruptcy at least twice, once in 2008 and then in 2013. But under the influence of America, International Monetary Fund (IMF) came to rescue. The economic sustenance of Pakistan by the United States, China and their allies, as well as international aid agencies served their short-term strategic interest, but it has destroyed the transformation of a country. The failure to transform means Pakistan will remain a major challenge to global and regional peace for decades to come. In Pakistan, there is a potential for state failure and the weapons falling into the hands of Islamic radicals. War and war preparation do not make a state strong. As the Pakistani case shows, if a state fails to innovate, it can become a geopolitical and security nightmare for its neighbors, other states, and not least itself. The role of political Islam in Pakistan development is also a big impediment. The military is one of the vital organs of the state. However, in Pakistan, the military becomes deeply involved in the politics of the state and dominates all other institutions. Powerful Pakistan military allocate great resources to the defense budget. Since this military capital is hidden from the public, it is also referred to as the military internal economy. In Pakistan, the military is the sole driver of military business activities. This military capital in Pakistan also becomes the major driver for the armed forces' stakes in political control. Therefore, military's business activities in Pakistan is caused by the military involvement in politics. This phenomenon intensifies the interest of the military in remaining in power in direct or indirect control of governance. This does not nurture the growth of democracy or rule of law and make this kind of military business activities the most precarious. In Pakistan, there is a militaristic and totalitarian system where an army general is the real head of the state. Pakistan's military today runs a huge commercial empire. There is no transparency of the military internal economy. The estimated worth runs into billions of dollars. Moreover, the military's two business groups, the Fauji Foundation and the Army Welfare Trust, are the largest business conglomerates in the country. Besides these, there are multiple channels through which the military acquires opportunities to monopolize national resources. Consequently, profit is directly proportional to power. Financial autonomy gives the armed forces a sense of power and confidence. Pakistan is a garrison state, one of the last ones in the world still standing. It is the military that has directly or indirectly ruled Pakistan for most of its existence. There are three international communities most serious and interlinked concern about Pakistan: the war-prone conflict with India, the jihadi threat, and the security of its nuclear weapons. The army sustains the ruinous security competition with India, directly or indirectly facilitates Islamic extremism and terrorism by harboring militant groups as a tool of foreign policy. But democracy in Pakistan has never been allowed to stand on its feet. After all, military coups happen when armed men want them to happen, and army retreat from power when they want to. Above all, its democratic transition has been aborted by military coups. The civil service, the judiciary, and the military inherited the state of Pakistan with all its colonial institutional structures. India, which attained statehood in the same world with a similar colonial institutional inheritance. India is a consolidated political democracy with firm civilian control of the armed forces. However, the two new states were born with a common constitutional framework: the civil service, the judiciary, and the military. However, the two new states were born with a common constitutional framework: the civil service, the judiciary, and the military. The two militaries inherited the same organizational structure, bureaucratic norms, fighting doctrines, training regimes, and above all, a belief that the military and civilian had separate jurisdictions of responsibilities that neither should breach. But Pakistan Army have been breaching it all the time. The military in British India was to prevent politicians and a parliamentary form of government from destroying the only focal point of authority, the viceregal executive. Pakistani military leadership believed that centralized authority was key to nation building. So the military finally set aside constitutional government and seized control of the state in October 1958. Pakistan Army is determined that continuing with parliamentary government would only bring more chaos rather than solving national problems. The military subsequently established a government with the help of civil military establishment and judiciary. Within that institution, the officer corps and its senior leadership makes the most important institutional decisions during both war and peace. Military mindset will never change in Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very dangerous to underestimate the determined opponent. The people of Afghanistan are determined to take their land back occupied by Pakistan. The Baloch and Sindhis are determined to get freedom from Pakistan. So, soon or later, Pakistan will be disintegrated. But now, the world community has the responsibility to do this integration peacefully. Otherwise, if the disintegration of Pakistan will come like in 1971, then the nuclear weapons can fall in the hands of terrorists, which will be then disaster, not only for South Asia, but for the whole world as well. So the best solution is to make Pakistan a part of history as soon as possible for the sake of peace and stability in the world.